Welcome back to this latest episode, Japan's top business interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, President, Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training. My special guest today is Michael Witt, who's the president of Nicole Racing here in Japan. Michael, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Yes, and we met each other at a German Chamber event, and you gave me your card, and I said, it would be fantastic to have you come and talk about your experience of leading in Japan. So how is it that you are here in Japan running Nicole Racing? That's a very unique thing. How did you get to this position? What's a bit of the background on your career?
Well, it was actually quite a journey until I got here. I started my career back in Germany as a management consulting for Accenture in the strategy practice. I was immediately leading various projects for automotive manufacturers in Europe. And after a while, I got headhunted by BMW headquarters in Munich, where I could then experience one manufacturer's strategy, decision-making, and politics, of course. It was 2012 when I got the opportunity to go to Japan.
With BMW?
With BMW. I was leading the after-sales operation for entire Japan for BMW and Mini, where I got first time the experience of running an operation in a foreign country. I did that for 5 years, then got a similar role again for BMW in Australia, but with a different market experience. It was lucky for me, lifetime chance in 2018, where I got a call and the opportunity to join the Nicole Group. So the Nicole Group is a leading automotive importer and retailer in Tokyo and Kanagawa, focusing on luxury cars.
Nicole himself was
Yes.
a very famous, successful racing car driver, as I recall.
Not only that, Nicole Racing, the founder, was a race driver in his 20s, but already at that time he knew that race driving probably doesn't pay the bills forever. Sometimes you have sponsors, sometimes you don't have. And he engaged already as a businessman while being a race driver, started importing race parts, and then started importerships and dealerships, and probably is one of the most successful German entrepreneurs, or was, in Japan.
Yes, I met him, I'm going to say, maybe 10, 15 years ago. I forget, it was an evening event, and I think from memory I was sitting next to him. I'd never met him before. I didn't know his background, but I didn't know how famous he was. I was like, I found out later. Oh, you were talking to Nicole. Wow, So that was a long time ago. I have not seen him since. But so you've been here all this time, and now you came to be the president of Nicole Racing in Japan.
I came here in 2018 to finally learn the retail business of the automotive industry, real Gemba business. So coming from headquarter, ivory tower, running a part of a national sales company, and now really on the ground, customer contact, leading the team on the ground, Gemba. And I did that for various brands for 3 years. And it was in 2021 where we became a wholly owned subsidiary of the Penske Automotive Group, which is one of the most successful automotive retail and commercial truck companies worldwide. And it was at that time in 2021 that I became the president of the Nicole Group. And now I'm in the wonderful position to lead 400 talented people, or in Japanese we say nakama, which makes it closer to friendship, friends.
Colleagues,
and we represent iconic brands like BMW Alpina, BMW Mini, Ferrari, and Rolls-Royce. And here I am.
Here you are, fantastic. And so if you think back to that first experience you had when you came from Germany, from more of a corporate role to leading people in Japan, what were some of the things that you thought, oh, this is very similar to what I've done before in leading teams, or this is quite different, or I wasn't expecting this, or this seems very familiar to me? What was your reaction to that at that time?
Frankly speaking, the similarity is leadership can be a challenge everywhere.
Okay.
I think leadership challenge is not related to Japan. You can have leadership challenges in your home country. In the company you have been working for many years. It always depends on the team. And yeah, the similarity is it's always about the people and the team. That's it. If you focus on that, you're going to be successful. But on the other hand, yes, Japan is quite a shock for foreigners when we arrive,
And what is
especially
it
on
about
work.
leading as a shock when as a leader? What were the things that happened?
Well, it starts with language. Of course, we always think professionals in Japan are not so capable of speaking Japanese, of speaking English. But look at it the other way around. All the Japanese think there's a new leader and cannot speak Japanese. So what's correct? Anyway, at that time, I didn't speak Japanese, and it's all about communication. And especially in business, you make important decisions, sometimes also based not only on numbers, but on nuances. So getting this level correct was difficult. It's an adaptation. The other thing is pace of change. So whereas you maybe got used to, okay, we decided it today, we implement tomorrow, that's a little bit different in Japan. I mean, there are concepts like nemawashi, laying the groundwork. There is kaizen, step-by-step improvement. It's just, in Japan, it doesn't come disruptive. And you have to bring the people on board. And you have to get used to that. You have to slow down a little bit. And as with any culture, even the German culture, you have to respect the German or the Japanese culture and play according to the rules. Don't change the rules. It will not work. Something which is often and maybe overly statement is trust and respect. Yeah, but that's Japan. I mean...
Well, just on that point about, making a decision and then having execution, I'm wondering whether, as Australians, or maybe Europeans, Americans, we would get into this room, the boardroom, we would have a vigorous debate and discussion, we would come to a decision, done, move on, that gets now executed. But usually in Japan, by the time it gets to the upper echelon of decision makers, there's already been a lot of nemawashi, this groundwork going on at the lower levels, adapting to people's opinions and adapting to people's concerns and fixing all that stuff first. But it takes a long time before it goes from that level up to the boardroom level of the key decision makers to then say, okay, good. So then at that point, I think it goes quickly.
It goes quickly. And we probably shouldn't give the listeners a strange impression. It's not for every decision. But we talk about huge change decision with massive impact on people, on financials. Normally the decision process happens before the board meeting. We're not in Japan. It's rare that you start like a giron or exchanging ideas and finally you decide in reality between two options in a board meeting. That's rare. And from a Japanese point of view, it also shouldn't be, because it's a surprise within the meeting again. And Japanese, for a reason, love stability. And stability, especially in Japan, I think it's an asset. The longer you live in this company, you appreciate those traditional values. But, I mean, being new here, building trust and respect, you read it everywhere, you read it in your books as well, but it is important. And first of all, you have to give trust before you receive trust. Trust is the accumulation of positive experiences. And you have to give them before people trust you. And you have to be consistent and aware of your behaviors. Whereas in a Western culture, you don't have to be so aware of that. And this is normally no one tells you. You find out the hard way. But even with these trust, pace of change, it's pretty similar in many other countries as well. Listen to the people.
I imagine that German business culture is probably in many ways one of the closer foreign cultures in business terms to Japan, in the sense of strong artisan tradition in Germany, attention to detail, being personally accountable, taking responsibility for your work, that type of thing, which are also very strong in Japan. And one of the things about Japan we notice is that when you ask people to do something, they will do it very thoroughly. Maybe they won't necessarily volunteer what they should be doing. Maybe if you ask them what we should be doing, they'd be a bit lost. But if you tell them what to do, then they say, okay, I got it. And then they're reliable to actually do it. And I remember it was a cold, bitterly cold winter's day, and I was in Marunouchi somewhere, and it was sleeting, it was terrible, coming out of the subway. And there was this poor woman there with an umbrella handing out tissue packs, bitterly cold, wind is strong. And I was looking at this and I thought to myself, wow, if that had been Australia, they'd have taken all those tissue packs to the dumpster, dumped it and be straight in the pub somewhere it was warm. They wouldn't stand in the sleet and the cold and hand it out. But she was standing in the sleet and the cold, handing out, which is that different sense of responsibility. So were there things like that which you got here, you thought, well, that's what I expect coming from a German business background, or was it even more so than maybe the background you had?
What's often said by Japanese and by my German business partners, friends as well, there is a natural closer link between German and Japanese. I think our characters are closer because of being majime, being on time, etc. That's all cleanliness. That's which translates into 5S principle, production principles. Yes, we are kind of in the same bucket, you could say, with exceptions. So that's why probably for us bonding is easier. It's not easy though. But still commitment. I mean, even a guard at a construction company, how passionate in deepest rain they do their job for 8 hours. You wouldn't find such a commitment in Germany either. It's just outstanding in Japan.
So you started, I think you said, in the service area for 5 years. And then what about when you came back to run the company as the president? Because now you're responsible for the whole thing, right? It's a little bit different position than running a division.
Yes.
What did you find different as a president compared to when you were just running one division? In terms of, from your leadership, things that are different this time, or you had that experience before, so it wasn't so different. How was that?
I think if you're responsible for the entire thing, the breadth of the business is, of course, magnificent. Also, each brand and the operation with each brand, and also the regulations with the manufacturer are completely different. So that you have to adapt to. But that's only the breadth. Especially for us as a company and also our mother company, one of the most important things in leadership is know your business and especially know your numbers. Numbers are non-negotiable. So basically it's the breadth and the depth of the business you have to adapt first, because otherwise you're not credible towards your people. The other thing is, if you go from a 30 people operation to a 400 people operation, the time you have to or you're allowed to spend with everybody just increases. I mean, leadership, I don't know your definition, but you should spend at least 70% in one-to-one contact with your employees. Coaching, sparring, small talk even. And that usage of time is incredibly difficult to manage at the first time. And then setting priorities as well while running the business and always trying to achieve or overachieve the numbers, the financial numbers, while making all employees and customers satisfied.
You mentioned it was the first time to come into retail as well.
Yes.
In terms of leadership, was there something, another dimension for you as a leader to be running a retail operation compared to previously, or didn't make that much difference?
It was completely different.
Okay, what was different?
Because what I used to say, and my friends at the manufacturers don't like that so much when I say that, so of course I will say that. You don't sell a car on a PowerPoint slide. So working at the headquarter level or on NSC level, sales company level, it's different. It's often theory, it's based on logical thinking, experience, but facing the customer, making a specific deal, training salespeople to have the right sales talk, to basically solve customer complaints and dissatisfaction, technical problems. That's something you're not going to be prepared from all the 12, 14 years before. You have to learn it completely new. And of course, the people working in retail business also have a different experience, upbringing, education than the ones that you were dealing with in Ivory Tower. So you have to adapt yourself. And I think that's one of my philosophies or leadership philosophies in Japan. Don't try to change people. It's not going to work. We don't have, as foreigners, the power to change a culture or people. We can inspire them. We can enrich their decision spectrum. We're not going to change them. And we should not have the aspiration to do so.
Yeah. Although, you know, for a lot of expats who are sent here, they are sometimes sent into a situation where the numbers aren't good, and headquarters gives them their running orders. Okay, you have got to go to Japan. You have to turn those numbers around, and don't tell me Japan's different. Get on with it, you know, this sort of stuff. And so when they get here, everything looks wrong, and they start blowing things up, and then sometimes it works and sometimes it's a complete disaster because they don't really know what they're doing. So there's a bit of a mix there, isn't there, between what you've got to do. But thinking back, your experiences in Japan, what did you find worked well when you're a division head or the president to get the team behind you to follow you? What worked well to get them engaged behind you?
I think overarching, it's always giving them a clear mission, vision, core values, orientation. From my experience in Japan, you're not just the president or a leader. Probably in Western countries, a new department head of Dale Carnegie comes, he stays there 3 years, and he goes again. Expat as well. In my role, I'm planned forever, I say, depending on the results, of course. But employees see me as I'm responsible for their future until retirement. So the respect, or probably the observation and the expectations from employees towards leaders in Japan are completely different. They always watch you closely, and you probably know Joshi no kaieru o miteru. They always look at the face of the superior or the boss. If I'm stressed, the team is stressed. If I'm in a bad mood, the team is in a bad mood. Maybe something's wrong with the company. Maybe something will happen in the future.
Maybe something we don't know about.
Exactly. This is something I was never aware in any, or put focus on in any other market before or in any other role. But you're being watched. Not stalked, but watched. They are very careful and have high expectation towards you. And you have to respond to that. You have to give guidance. As I said, where are we heading to? And you have to give, well, first of all, you have to give a role model experience, as difficult as it is. If you give, or try to, and we come to that, a new company culture, you are the first one to have to stick 100% to that. You have to be the role model. You have to be the role model not only in the company, but also privately. When they see you privately, you have to be consistent in what you say, what you think, how you communicate, including your body language as well. In terms of empowering or engaging people, it's about empathy and appreciation. What do people expect next to a fair salary at work? Please give me positive feedback about my hard work. So really having individual reviews, praising people, also team efforts. Also in Japan, it's always said there is no innovation. If someone has a new idea, tell it to everybody. Make a video about it. Share it with everybody. The other thing is, of course, the team, especially Japanese teams, they follow you to anywhere. and work incredibly hard. So when we're successful, celebrate the success. It doesn't always have to be a special incentive. Make a party, get them out, make a nomikai. We have company events where we bring our employees to Fuji Speedway, watch a race, and have a huge event under the motto of our new Nicole culture. I think those factors are incredibly important. Of course, engaging them means empowering them. Give them additional tasks, but with a parachute. Japanese are very risk averse.
So when you say the parachute, what does the parachute consist of there to give them that confidence to do something different?
I think the parachutes consist of two patterns. The one is probably in a Western culture, we have this problem. Please solve it.
Yeah, get on
Greg,
with it.
solve it.
Yeah,
Get on with it.
Yeah.
In Japan, the expectation towards a leader, from my perspective, is to explain the problem and to already provide the first initial solution scenarios and the first steps to be tackled in order to give confidence to the Japanese employee, and then guide him through the process. It's not like, and we meet in 2 months again. Let's meet on a weekly basis. And any time you have something in between. Be approachable. The other thing is, if it fails...
Just on that point, though, I think you raise a good point, because for a lot of expats, they would think, I've explained it. He knows or she knows what's got to be done. Get on with it. And in 2 months' time, I'll expect to see the fruits of our decision. Except you find out there's nothing being done.
Yeah, but
it's like, oh my God, we just lost 2 months. You know?
Probably the basic error here is I have explained sufficiently as a boss, and now it's your responsibility as an employee to fix the problem. That's how we do it in Western company. No, wrong. It's always about the team. It's always about the team. If the employee fails, it's the boss's fault. If the employee is successful, it's the success of the employee. It's so different. And yes, for 2 months, nothing will happen. Of course, the employee will get worried, will probably sweat every minute, will stay long in the office, and will not dare to say that there's no progress. It's you went through that, I went through that. It's just not going to work.
So, as you say, better to explain it, but then not over-manage or micromanage, but just check that they're going well. And what about, when you talk about risk aversion, one of the problems with innovation, it's a messy process. You know, and you're working in consulting where you're coming up with lots of innovative ideas and people have to then execute them. It's a messy process. And so for the Japanese, generally speaking, they don't like those messy processes. They like things which are ordered, are going to be okay, and no errors, no defects, no mistakes, no problems, nice and smooth. But innovation is not like that. And so there will be errors, there will be defects, there will be problems. But it's how we deal with those that makes the big difference. And if some companies, it's like on one hand they say, well, Michael, get out there and innovate, and something doesn't go right, whack on the side of the head, you screwed up. So you can't expect people to innovate if you're going to whack them on the side of the head when things don't go perfectly. I think this is where leaders' ability to deal with problems, deal with mistakes, makes all the difference. As you said, they watch you very carefully. Well, they also watch each other. And if Suzuki got smacked in the ear for messing up on an innovation project, they realize, well, I'm not going to get involved in innovation projects because I see what happened to Suzuki. I'm going to do nothing. So we have to be very careful with that, I think.
Look, that's another expectation from foreign companies. Expert comes in and says, innovation doesn't happen. Oh my God, we have to really revolutionize that, and it's not going to work. It's probably also a little bit arrogant to always think that the Western management style can be adapted in Japan, because we probably Germans would not go to the US and ask Americans to adapt to the German management style, as would Japanese not go to the US and say, no, we do it the Japanese way. So for me, it's a little bit arrogant, but maybe it's not arrogant. It's a lack of knowledge, a lack of cultural knowledge. Look, Toyota, Panasonic, Sony, Rakuten, Uniqlo, SoftBank, they're all pretty innovative, and they are in Japan. It's not a disruptive innovation. It's a step-by-step approach innovation again. And I think it's mostly triggered by cross-functional teams, because if you cross-functional it, the risk is shared. Risk sharing is very important. And again, creating an environment where non-successes are not punished, but successes are, again, celebrated as a team. We also, when we have new ideas, also towards our new culture that we implement, we have interviews with the team or with the person. We load it up on our new intranet, and we share these best practices and try to motivate by showing this best practice that others follow. I think it's only, I couldn't think of leading a company in Japan by fear or top-down harassment nowadays. Probably in the past this worked, but generation is changing, and we have to adapt to that.
And young people have got options. You start power harassing them, they say, well, that's okay, I'm out of here, I'll get a job so easily, sayonara, right? But you made a good point before too about trust in the leadership. We did an engagement survey, and it came up with three things. One was your obvious one, the relationship with your immediate supervisor, very, very critical. Another one was your belief that the senior leadership are taking the company in the right direction. And the third one was pride in the company. And often in big organizations, the division heads are very ambitious, and they can be feuding with each other because they're trying to get to the top. And there's one division fighting against the other divisions, and
silos,
sales versus marketing, IT against everybody type of thing. Whereas, in fact, we're a whole, and the enemy is outside, not inside. And I was just thinking when you said that before about you have control over their livelihood. And I was thinking, 190 years ago, my ancestors sailed from Bristol in England to Tasmania on a ship, sailed with sails, and in those days, your lives were in the hands of the captain. And I think in that era, everyone knew that, but we've become so successful with automation. We don't get on a plane and we expect to get to our destination, but actually our lives are in the hand of the pilot. But we don't have such a strong view of that, or we don't take boats anymore very much. So that idea of having a clear purpose, you being consistent, you being predictable from a employee point of view, very, 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 very important. So they were good points. In terms of, we talk about innovation, what have you found has worked well to actually get ideas from bottom up? Because we come from outside, we have a different education system, we have different experience of different, organizations, maybe even different industries. So we tend to come up with a lot of ideas ourselves as a leader, and we can drive these ideas internally. But sometimes, we have to be careful that we're not the only one coming up with the ideas, because we're sort of dominating everyone else. What have you found works well to get ideas from bottom up?
One point I was referring to is cross-functional teams. You just be it even if it starts like a company event you want to organize for everybody, and then you bring people into this event committee from different departments and ask them to create their own proposals for their event. That's the most creative process I've ever seen, because it's personally for them. They want to make a great event because they will participate in this event. And then all of a sudden you see, yes, Japanese are very creative. Then what's important is, even though you wouldn't agree to the proposal or you would have a different preference, tell them it's a great proposal and we go into this direction. Stick to them, because if you always know everything better, then on the other hand, you cannot complain that the team is not innovative, because they will wait until you have an idea, which is often in Japan.
Give me the idea, boss, and I'll execute it.
The team is coming up with proposals. Bosses say, no, that shit, excuse my French, this is not good, this is not good. we do it my way.
Yeah.
So which will lead in the long run, and Japanese have seen experts coming and going.
Yeah.
He's gone in 3 years. Why should we make an effort for innovation?
Mm.
So it works, but also
Do you do things? Have you found like cross-functional teams?
Yeah.
That's one way. What about have you found brainstorming sessions, innovation sessions useful? Do you do any of that?
we do it in smaller groups. What we are also, I mean, we are lucky to be part of one of the most successful global automotive retailers and commercial truck companies, the Penske Automotive Group. They are basically in each of the continents. So we have a source of unlimited best practices that we can use. Best practice, global best practices in Japan, we always have to be a little bit careful, because if you translate them one-to-one, will not work, not accepted. Adapt them, try them small, make the team understand that it's actually successful, get the team buy-in, next. So we have a huge library and a great experience that we have access as well, because as you said, every company is probably struggling to always generate ideas from internally. And maybe it's not only internally, it's a combination of. But again, build the trust in new things. Oh yes, that makes our life easier. Or digital is actually better than the papers that we created and the Excel sheets for ages. It works. It works. Is the innovation strength of the Silicon Valley higher than in Japan? Maybe yes. But Japan has different advantages.
We have that too. We get, because we're an American founded company, 113 years ago now.
Wow.
113 years ago. The source of a lot of our content starts from new headquarters in New York, and it comes to us, and then we translate it on two levels. One is language, but the other is cultural too, because a lot of things which would make a lot of sense in an American culture make zero sense in a Japanese culture. Like, well, that bit is out. Just don't even bother. Just cut that out, or change it or vary it to. In fact, I told you that I interviewed Harmit Pannan from KK Iris yesterday, and he had a good metaphor. He said, it's a key to the lock, and the key is coming from Germany or America or Australia. It's not going to fit in the Japanese lock. So you have to grind. You have to find this bit doesn't fit, so you grind the key and change it until it does fit. And I thought that's a good metaphor. And in fact, listening to you talking about, adjusting and adapting, I thought that key metaphor came to my mind. And I think that is a good point, to have to make those adjustments, because, any company that just says we did it, it worked in America, it worked in Australia, it worked in Europe, it's going to work in Japan, is very optimistic. Maybe it could. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it'd be a rare event, I would imagine.
It's priceless to have many additional ideas. Just be selective on how you implement them.
And you talked before about trust. What have you found works well to get people who are working for you to have trust in you as the leader?
It's a difficult question. Probably should ask my team first.
Well, we all have a view. I mean, we have our own view on what we think's going on. I know I've got my own view on what I think's going on in my company.
Well, I'm still here, so
so far so good, right?
Yeah. Trust takes time, and I think most important is you have to give trust before you receive trust.
And what does that mean, though? When you say give it before you receive, what does that look like from a Japanese employee point of view of receiving that trust? What does that trust look like?
Be polite. Use polite Japanese. You know the Japanese politeness level. I don't behave, or I don't use kimi, omae,
kun,
yare, kun. I use must form to everybody.
Yeah, me too.
Because it's just polite. It's how it should be. To start with. The most trust or respect that you can give to an employee is time. We always have open door policy. I have open door policy. Can always come in, can always come for Sodan or discussions. And the other thing is appreciation. Appreciation of everybody's hard work. And in Japanese, well, small talk satsudan, very important. Don't rush in your office at the moment if employees stand in the hallway whatsoever. Engage in a small discussion. It's 5 minutes, but the effect lasts for hours. Have interest in people. And of course, trust them to do things, to do additional things. And also, again, we come to the risk averseness. Ask them to make decisions. And if they make a decision and you even know it's wrong or you would have done a different one, if it's not really have a substantial impact negatively on the business, go for it. Maybe they come back later 2 months and said, actually 2 months ago, I think I should have made a different decision. Quick win.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Leading is easy. Getting people to follow is the hard part. That is a great quote from Yogi Berra. Surprisingly, despite the complexities of leading here in Japan, everyone has to work it out by themselves. Foreign leaders want practical, applicable, expert advice. This is now available for the first time in history. Grab your copy of Japan Leadership Mastery on Amazon today and avoid the mystery, trial and error, especially the errors. And they've learned something.
Exactly.
You know, you can. It's like classic. We tell people something, they may, first of all, may not hear it, really. They may not agree with it. They may not like it. They may give some superficial acceptance, but they're not motivated. But when we give them the freedom, but even if they fail, the lesson is learned. You know, I had that recently. One of my guys wanted to do something I knew to my bones, this ain't going to work, you know. I said, no, go for it. You know? And sure enough, it didn't work. But there was never any, I've done this before myself, that didn't work. No, you learn, because he's a young guy. He's got to learn. I've got to give him the chance to fail, to learn, and be patient. It wasn't a sink the company type of thing. It wasn't anything like that. So it was an easy decision in that sense, I suppose. But in terms of, apart from those things, you know, that you talked about, anything else particularly you've found? You talked about your mood. If you're in a bad mood, they're in a bad mood. If you're down, they're down. How do you go about that sort of stuff? Because I found myself, I try to be very consistent. I try to, if I'm troubled, to keep it to myself and not share it with people, or I think I'm doing. Although the other day, I must have had something on my face. I didn't see it. And I was in early. One of my guys was in early. And he looked at my face. He said, Greg, what's wrong? And I said, I'm not masking my feelings very well. He could see that I'm troubled by something. And I said, I've got this particular issue, blah, blah, blah. But it was a reminder to me that I cannot allow this screen to have anything but positivity on it. And I have to be in control of that all the time. And I wasn't in control, but I thought I was. There's a gap there for me. I thought, I've got to be more careful. But how about your idea on that?
I think we have to be authentic, but we shouldn't be actors. I think that doesn't go along. I mean, if you're aware that you have a bad day, maybe don't try to go through everybody's office and show your face which is in a bad mood. But I started things like when I was in a rush for a meeting, I was even not running, but very fast running to the copy machine. That already makes a very bad impression, and it saves you 10 seconds. It's unnecessary. These unnecessary these strange character traits you should be aware of.
That is one thing about Japan I hate. And you'll have seen it. It's exactly that. It's that sort of fake running to something. And I used to work in banking, and I would tell my team, walk fast, never run. We're in a banking industry. We've got to be stable. We've got to be very credible. When you're running, it looks like there's some panic going on or something's really wrong. Walk fast, never run. But you do see Japanese, they've got this sort of, look, I'm really committed, I'm really passionate, I'm running, I'm working so hard. To me, that's like terrific, but the message you're sending that observers are seeing is maybe not the message you want. So I'm really strict on no running in the office.
So, and it's the small things, the responsibility we have because we reflect to our employees in Japan is heavy, I would say, in a good meaning. So I try always when I leave my office to wear a jacket for any reason, even for the restroom. Because we are in Sekyaku, we are in customer service business. We deal with luxury customers. If I run around without a jacket, our salespeople do. I don't want, so if I do show a bad behavior or don't stick to the high standards we set ourselves at Nicole, it doesn't have a good influence on others. Does it work all the time? No, Greg, it does not, because we're human. Being aware of that is the first step.
But in a way, in Japan, it should be easier because the uniform mentality here is well developed, you know, and they like a uniform, and you've got a company badge on, and I've got a company badge on, and people like to have the shasho. It indicates they are part of a group. So I think, you know, that idea of how you present yourself, if it's a service staff, they're wearing a certain uniform, people in the office wearing a certain uniform, a certain attire and whatever, I think that works well here. I mean, Australians, you spend a lot of time in Australia, very casual people, Australians, extremely casual. A bit harder to get them to get the idea, but not impossible. Yeah. But what about culture? You know, because you have Japan culture, then you have the founder's culture, Nicole's culture that he brought to the organization. You have the, I guess they're an American company, the American owners' culture.
Yes, the Penske Group.
And then you have Michael culture in terms of how you want the company to be and how you like things to run. So what have you found works well in Japan to build a culture as the leader?
First question is, all cultures that you mentioned, I consider as being harmonized, similar, interlinked. When we talk about the Nicole Group, the Nicole Group was successful and is successful, but has been successful for 45 years. 2 years ago, we started a change process in terms of changing the company culture. That is our game, which is a monumental task. Takes a lot of time, involvement, direction giving. And I'd say after 2 years now, we built the fundament.
2 years.
2 years, the fundament. So as a leadership team, because we want to create the culture for the next 45 years, that's the ultimate goal. So as a leadership team, we defined new mission, core values, basically the raster and the criteria you can measure everybody's behavior on a daily basis. And we gave it a motto for the new culture, which is called One Nicole. And One Nicole means, there's many meanings, but the most important ones is we always want to be number one. And the second meaning is we can only achieve that as one team. So what we did is we had a lot of communications, workshops, webinars, videos, paper, posters, stands. That's all nice and that's important. But most important is that, including me and the management team and the next 2 layers of management, are role models. The crucial thing or the challenging thing about a company culture is the management can decide but not really implement, because it needs 400 people to accept the culture and to follow that culture. But you cannot make people follow a new culture. So managers to be a role model, but on the other hand, if employees do not behave according to the new core values, tell them and give feedback. This is a challenge in Japan because it's not a positive news. Of course, it can be always positive. This is not according. This is how you should do it, and that is the benefit of doing it. However, we also have, as I said, this is an ongoing process. We also have awards, culture awards. One Nicole Culture Award, so quarterly. Every employee can submit other employees from own department, other departments, if someone did something special with regards to our new culture. Can of course win an award. Incentive is also attached, but even more so, we then have a huge announcement video with number 1, number 2, number 3. This is shared to all employees. That is done by me, introducing why we give or what this employee did special and why we ranked him number 1, 2, or 3, or she or her. But then at the same time, we make an interview with the awardee, why he or she was focusing on this core value, why he or she was adapting or thinks that the new mission helps, or a new culture helps him or her in his daily work, and share that with every employee.
And that's interesting because you have a sort of headline, Tanaka gets the award, and people, Tanaka got the award. But actually having Tanaka talk about what that meant for them, how they internalized it, how they thought about it, how they innovated for it, how they were consistent with it, how they overcame difficulty with it. There's a lot of storytelling. And we remember the story very well. We're great at remembering the story. Tanaka won the award, okay, big deal. But Tanaka's story may be something that really impacts people.
Frankly speaking, their message in video is much more important than mine. How do employees think about it? Because it's also for us a measurement, how far we in terms of the implementation. And you know that often you ask Japanese to make a video and it's hazukashi, I don't want to show my face. With pride, they do that. They have pride about it and want to share it with everybody, and it makes me.
That's great.
That's what makes me happy. And of course, I told you about the Fuji Speedway event that we had, and we were inviting our employees, families, and friends there, and we're making a huge event, spectacular event, under the motto of One Nicole. This time we chose the core value of communication amongst the team, one family. And that's also part of continuously implementing a culture. And of course, if you're successful during implementing a new culture, the more easily it's going to be adapted by everybody. But if it's not adapted by everybody, it was only a idea from the management. Or it stays.
It just stays on the paper, on the poster, and that's it.
Eni kaita mochi.
Yeah. And what about if someone called you up and said, Michael, I've got this job now. I'm going to come to Japan. I'm going to run the organization as country head in Japan. You know about Japan, Michael. How can I be successful as an effective leader in Japan? What advice would you have for them?
Many. Because we have seen it so many times, right? And probably some of the statements repeat to previous statements. But probably number one is don't try to change the culture, don't try to change the people. Let the culture and the people change you, because it will make you a better man or woman in Japan.
Okay.
At the same time, try to inspire them, be a part of the team.
So just coming back to that, why will it make us better? What about this country is going to make us better if we let that happen?
Behavior, attitude, peace, inner peace, relaxation, appreciation of normal things, besides appreciation of nature, food, etc., and everything Japan has to offer. So hopefully it's in a good way. When I go back to Germany or Australia, people say I have changed since I left Germany and Australia. Would I still be able to work in Germany or Australia? That's a different question, because I adapted to the Japanese style. But as a personality, there are some voices that raise that I changed to the better side of me.
But I agree with you. I think anyone who's worked in Japan for a long time or been successful in Japan, I think is really well suited to be successful anywhere in the world, because this culture is so demanding in so many different ways. It's got so many layers. It's got so much depth in it that when you take all of that and you, like I'm Australian, right? So I know the culture there. I know that I would be a much better Australian living in Australia, having spent 40 years in Japan, than if I'd only stayed in Australia. I think my ability to be patient, empathetic, communication, sensitivity, I think all that stuff has really been enhanced by living here, which it wasn't necessarily enhanced there. So I think you're right. What other things would you give the advice to someone who's being sent here to be effective in Japan?
Again, focus from day one onwards on trust and relationship. Care about the people. Spend time with them at work and also outside of work. You don't have to do everyday communication, but care about the team, and especially create success stories and celebrate successes with them. And always think about, if the team is successful, it's not jiman, it's the team's success. And if the team is not successful, you as a leader were not yet successful enough. I think that's very, very important, especially with trust. It happens. Employees have personal problems.
Particularly today, aging parents, which, parents are living much longer.
Every day.
And it used to be kids, but now it's the kids and the aging parents, right?
And often it's like you get the news too late. And because of that, I have to leave. But if you take special care and find an exception outside of the work role specifically for this person to take care of family first, family is first, work is second, and find a compromise, especially for people that had long years of contribution to the company, they will never forget. That is trust. That
is trust, yeah. I talk about values. We have a hierarchy of values in the company. We are professional, respectful, sincere, enthusiastic, principled. They're our basic core values. However, we have a hierarchy, and the number one priority value is your health. Number two is your family's health. And number three is the company health, in that order. And then you can make that statement, but you've got to live up to it. So if we've had a couple of cases of people having cancer, and therefore they have to have treatment, they have to have Medicaid time off, or they've got family members who've got some major medical problem, the parents are dying or parents are very sick. You've got to be flexible. You can't be, company comes first and who cares about your relatives, No, that's not going to fly. So I think this is important. I agree with that.
I was just going to say, we have 6 core values: integrity, responsibility, innovation,
It's in there.
respect, growth, and communication.
All right.
But basically, for us, there is no hierarchy. But having said that, our mission is to deliver joy that exceeds the expectation of our employees, or nakama as we say, customers and partners, business partners, but deliberately in that orders. Employees first, everything else second. So which is pretty similar to that.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah, and we came up with a sort of, as a group, we came up with a mission, the vision, the values as a group. But this thing about your health, family health, company health, that came up later when people started to get serious illnesses and realized that, you can't be thinking about company health when people are potentially going to be dying of cancer or something, or their family members are really, really ill. So I think we've changed ourselves to adjust to that. What other things would you give advice to someone to be successful here?
That's a tough one, and it hurts, and you know that. Learn the language.
Learn the language.
Learn
Okay,
the
good.
language. If you're here only for 3 years, learn the language. If you're longer here, even more learn the language. It's difficult. You will reach one plateau after the other. It's frustrating, but for me, it's still a long way. I mean, I do business in Japanese 8 hours a day, but still improvement is necessary. But personally, I think you talked about the key to the lock of a door. I think Japanese not only locks doors. By speaking Japanese, you realize that there are doors that you have not seen before. There are different doors, and once you enter them, it goes again, it connects towards trust and relationship building. And especially, I mean, Japanese...
Did you on that, regarding the language, did you join a language school? Did you get a tutor? I don't know, is your wife Japanese? You practice at home? Or how did you learn Japanese?
So I have to say, from 2012 to 18, I was very lazy and I hardly learned it. It was 2018 when I joined the Nicole group, and I thought, Mama, this little restaurant Japanese, that will be sufficient to join the Nicole group. It was on this place where I 6 years ago joined my first management meeting in Japan and at the Nicole group. And literally the part I understood at that time of a 3-hour meeting was 2%.
Ooh, okay.
And that was already including car and relevant vocabulary to our company. And then I joined a language school, and then later joined with specific language teachers, and always did that on my free days. So Wednesday and Sunday was a free day, and I did 2-3 lessons, and I did that for the first 4 years. And I'm still taking lessons. So normally every Sunday now, it's 1 to 2 lessons.
And you're reading as well?
I'm not reading.
Not reading, okay.
I'm not reading. So communication is pretty convenient with Google DeepL nowadays.
Yeah.
I do read some kanjis, katakana and hiragana is no problem at all. But I don't have to read. If you want to connect, for instance, probably not short-term expats, and I'm not an expat, would probably not agree to that, but except Japanese are very disciplinary, loyal, hardworking. I think other specific traits of Japanese are they have a high pride, passion, and probably I shouldn't give a comment on that as being German. Incredible sense of humor. But only if you tap into these traits. And normally that's a hidden door.
Well, here's
pride,
a question.
probably yes.
Do you have a sense of humor? Do you think?
probably in the Japanese way of oyaji gyagu, they would probably mostly agree.
Because I'm just saying, I think you're right. There is an element of humour, and you've got to have some element of that yourself to be able to be part of the group. I think if you're a humorless person, it's going to be hard to be part of the group. They're going to you're always an outsider. You're an outsider, no, because you're a foreigner, but in a way, you make a one comment or one word and everyone starts laughing. You just hit the ironic button or some little tangent or something.
So, talking about humor, the joke about the thinnest book in the British Library. It's the book about the German sense of humor.
Is that? I haven't heard that joke before. Okay, all right.
But let humor aside, what I like is Japanese proverbs.
Proverbs, okay. Mm-hmm.
And if you use the proverb that not everybody knows, because you really have to learn them in the right business context, it's always a highlight. And apart from that, people appreciate that you give an additional effort into learning the language. So no one would see that's artificial or whatsoever, and it works somehow. It's these 3 recommendations, other than being authentic.
Have you come up with any personal organizational habits which have served you well? Because as leaders, we're always under time pressure, we're always under organizational pressure. We've got to be really well organized to run you've got 400 people here, right? You've got to be well organized. But have you come up with any particular habits that have served you well in your career to be well organized?
I try to have fixed schedules every week. So from management meetings, weekly, monthly, and I schedule all the one-on-ones already for the rest of the year. And I keep buffer times because you will have to use them for short something comes up and you need time, because as the president of the company, you cannot say, sorry, I don't have time. Yes, it's important, but I'm fully booked out. So I probably try to book out only 60% of my schedule. The rest being I also have to work or strategize for myself and for those overflow topics. It works well, but at the moment it doesn't allow me a lot of going out, having business lunches, etc. I never have lunch. So basically for me, 12 to 1, except
that's why you're so slim. You're not eating anything.
12 to 1 is for me the perfect working time for me. Of course, I don't force anybody to work with me between 12 and 1, but that gives me more flexibility. And that's a recent organizational change for me, which gives me more efficient work hours. I'm more flexible with that. And I try to leave at 7. Even though I might open the laptop on the couch, after that when coming home, I try to avoid that, especially when writing emails. I try to send them out on the next day, because you give a bad example into the company. If you work until 10, 11, you ask everybody to reduce overtime, but then you send in And what happens between 8 o'clock at night and next day? That's a habit. No? And if you change that, it helps.
Yeah, I agree. And what about resilience? You and I, we've been in business a long time. We've been through recessions. We've got ground war going on in Europe, one in the Middle East. We've got supply chain problems. We've got Corona with a global pandemic. We've had earthquake, tsunami, triple nuclear meltdown here. There's been just no shortage of challenges in business. But what have you found works well to keep you resilient in the face of all these challenges?
Probably number 1, a positive mindset.
How do you maintain a positive mindset? Because if you consume the news, it's 99% bad news most of the time.
I think on the one hand side, it's your personal lifestyle. I do a lot of sports, long distance running, yoga, gym, meditation, and healthy food. That's probably a basic attitude. On the other hand, also with the Penske Group, also within the company, I have so many senpai or people that give me advice, or I can ask for advice. So there's no challenge too big. Also, not only with Penske or internally, also the manufacturers, they always provide advice. We're all in the same ship. If one manufacturer is in a tough time, we're one family. We have to solve it together. So I think the worst thing as a leader would be to think you're on your own. No, you have a huge network you can rely on.
That's a question. That's a question for me, because maybe it's the Aussie male. You've spent time in Australia, so you know it's a very macho culture. Men have to be men and resilient. And, you know, when you're the head of the company, you can't tell your troops about all your problems because it's going to cause uncertainty in them. You can't really share it with your spouse because she's not in the company, even though she's supportive. Who do you talk to? You know, even you can't tell your boss because they don't care. They expect the results. So in a way, I often think that as leaders, to a great extent, we can be very isolated. So when you say that, I'm interested to know, who do we talk to about our problems?
I think other long-term CEOs in Germany, in Japan, that's one way. When it relates to brands or BMW and Mini, of course, manufacturer, I still have many friends in Germany. But to be honest, maybe our company culture is a little bit different. So the culture of the Penske Automotive Group, our American headquarter, who's also engaged in many races, success, one of the most race team owner. It's all about the team. Whatever you read, it's all about the people and the team. So if I struggle with something, I can go to my boss and openly talk about it. And I will get advice, because if Japan is struggling, it will have a bottom line impact on the Penske Group as well. So I never had I don't dare to address a weakness or, sorry, Mr. XY, I have no clue about that. The response is then, yeah, let's schedule a meeting and put some ideas together. I had some experience somewhere before and let's go for that. No one, I think it's in our head, no one expects that we know everything. We're a human being and we haven't gotten every experience in the past before. So I think that is not only at Nicole, but also with the Penske Group, one of the greatest advantages. It's one team. We also more or less accept titles. There is no really lived or perceived hierarchy. You don't have in a race team. It's now, of course, someone has to win the race in the car, but without the mechanics team in the garage, good luck in winning the race. That's the spirit that we have and implement. Well, Michael, it's been really nice to finally have this conversation and great insights today. So thank you very much for sharing. Thank you so much. So please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.